Hello, BookTube. As some of you will know, Matthew at Mayberry Book Club and I, in October, are going to be doing a read-along of Frank Herbert's novel, Dune. In commemoration of the gazillion-dollar movie that's coming out at the end of October, and also because it's never a bad time to do a read-along of Dune. This is the Folio Society edition that is way too expensive for me. I'd love to have it, but there is no justification whatsoever in me buying a book this expensive when I'm going to destroy it, or some future dog is going to destroy it. So I can gaze at it, but I can't own it. We're going to be doing a read-along of Dune. We're going to be splitting it into 4 parts. And a lot of you have expressed interest in either reading Dune for the first time in October or rereading Dune. And it's to those of you who are expressing interest for the first time that I'm really addressing this video. Because one comment that I have heard over and over again from people who are approaching Dune is that they're intimidated by it. It seems intimidating. Even people I know who've started the novel have sometimes put it aside because it felt like they were being dropped in the middle of a massively complex story without any effort being made to catch them up. The reason it feels that way is because that's exactly what happens. That's exactly true. And there is an artistry involved in that believe me, you're going to end up loving, even though it feels a little inhospitable at first. And I thought to address that, I would make a little Dune prep video now that you can refer to before October rolls around. October is just a couple of weeks away. It's right on top of us. So I thought a Dune prep video would be in order. Now, this is not going to have anything in the way of what the 21st century noxiously refers to as spoilers, as if any kind of random stray fact could spoil a great work of literature. It's not going to have anything like that. Instead, what I thought I would do in this Dune prep video would be to give you the backdrop that you need to make this novel less intimidating. And for that backdrop, we want to go back thousands and thousands of years. Dune takes place thousands and thousands of years in humanity's future, when Earth is a dim and mostly forgotten memory, and when thousands of worlds are aligned together in an empire. Those of you who read science fiction, it is a standard science fiction empire that has been ruled for thousands and thousands of years by a tripod of forces. There's the Emperor, who controls a bloodthirsty military cadre of expert soldiers, but who is also the feudal chief of that society. Then there are noble houses, both major and minor, hereditary dukedoms that are passed on from generation to generation and have been for thousands of years, millennia even. They form a kind of power counterbalance with the emperor. And balancing both of those is a gigantic corporation called CHOAM, C-H-O-A-M, that sort of regulates and rules the commerce of the empire. And that has directorships and seats and fingers in every financial pie. Now, there are 2 important things. There are many, many important elements in that society that I'm talking about, the one that exists thousands and thousands of years from now, that is the basis for Dune. There are many important elements of that society. There are the Bene Gesserit, for instance, an all-female society of warrior nuns, basically, who work behind the scenes, advising ruling houses, advising the emperor, always with a plan of their own that is genetic in nature. They are essentially trying to conduct generational eugenics on the human race in order to produce one particular kind of human, a man with Bene Gesserit superpowers. The Bene Gesserit have amazing control over their minds and bodies, but they're all female. They're an all-female order, and they are attempting to manipulate the breeding practices of humanity, of the royal houses, in order to come to the genetic payload that will be essentially a male Bene Gesserit. But in the course of the thousands and thousands of years that they have been working on that, they have also made themselves a powerful social force. Same thing is true with a bunch of other groups, from the Bene Tleilaxu, who are dabblers in illicit technology, to, for instance, the Spacing Guild. And one of the key elements in this galactic empire, same as with any galactic empire, whether it's Isaac Asimov or anybody else, the only way you can have a galactic empire is if you have faster than light travel. If it takes 75 years, 7,500 years to get you from one solar system to another, then you can't have a galactic empire. It can't have commerce, and it can't have news, and it can't have military enforcement. And you need all three of those to have an empire. So what you need is faster than light travel. And many, many, many years ago, long before the events of Dune, faster than light travel is invented. The Holtzman drive is invented. Another thing that happens thousands of years before Dune, it's mentioned a couple of times in the novel. You don't need to know any of the details, but you do need to know something about it because it informs the world that you are dumped into in this novel. Something that happens thousands of years before this book is something called the Butlerian Jihad. And that is when mankind as a whole rises up against the super advanced AI intelligent machines with which mankind has previously surrounded itself. The Butlerian Jihad is born of a fear and revulsion of those machines taking over. And not only are all of those machines destroyed, but an absolutely invariable social compact is enacted where they can never be recreated, where you can never have a machine in the guise of a human mind, where you can never have anything that can calculate with that combination of speed and intuition. You can't do it. One of the problems with the Butlerian Jihad, keep in mind, this is not in Dune. This is ancillary history to Dune, but it's going to help you. It's going to help you a lot to understand at least a little of the background of what's going on in this book. You will feel less bewildered when you have some of this stuff in the back of your mind. One of the side effects of the Butlerian Jihad, of the banishing of essentially what we would now call AI, is that the Holtzman drive, this faster-than-light drive that starships can fit on themselves, becomes incredibly dangerous. You need AI in order to extrapolate a safe path for faster-than-light travel so that you don't end up plunging through a star or materializing inside a planet when you get to your destination. You need AI to do that. Otherwise, there's no way to factor in all the variables until a way is discovered. And the way that's discovered is another thing you need to know about Dune before you go into the book, and that is the spice melange. This is a substance that is only found on Arrakis, the desert planet known as Dune. It is only found there. It can be harvested there, despite the presence of menacing, absolutely enormous and ferocious sandworms that tend to guard patches of spice when they're found on the surface. Despite that fact, a grown sandworm can swallow an entire factory easily, and they are vicious about their territory. But despite those dangers, melange can be harvested on Dune. And melange, when it is ingested by certain people, allows them to use precognition. It sharpens their ability to estimate the future, which is what they need in order to simulate those forbidden AI and actually look at a flight path. Basically, a flight path for a starship. Guild navigators, the Spacing Guild, starts to develop navigators, human beings, who are so saturated with the spice melange, bought at huge cost from dealers, from the people who run Dune. The Spacing Guild learns that after time they can develop guild navigators who can use a version of the prescience that is created by that spice and by nothing else in order to make interstellar travel possible. So although that mercantile leg of the tripod, Comb, although Comb has its fingers in every kind of financial pie, every kind of equipment that's sold, fur, food, anything that's sold, although it has made an enormous amount of money, a government ruling amount of money in that, you can see from what I'm saying that all of it is based on melange. All of it is based on the spice. The spice must flow. Without it, you don't have the guild navigators to plot the courses of starships, and so you don't have an empire. Without it, you are trapping humans on their individual worlds and sentencing them to crawl between those worlds in cryosuspension over many generations. No possibility of people just up and going from one planet to the next. That's only possible with the Holtzman drive, and the Holtzman drive is only made feasible with the spice. which gives you a pretty good idea of how central the spice is to the Empire. What we encounter when Dune begins is the moment when the Empire, too late, realizes that everything, literally all of it, rests on this one thing. And that therefore the person who controls this one thing has the greatest power in the universe, whether that person is the Emperor or not. Another thing that you need to remember about the distant past of Dune is a little bit smaller, but it's a little more personal, which is that thousands of years in the past, many generations in the past, a member of one of the noble houses, the House Atreides, which house mythology says traces its line all the way back to the House of Atreides in ancient Greece, hence the name. At one point in the very distant past, in the aftermath of a particular battle that is well remembered in the Imperium, a member of the House Atreides banished a member of another noble house, House Harkonnen, for cowardice. And that set up bad blood between the houses that became generational. It was never usually acted on, but the houses hate each other. Those two houses hate each other. And the Emperor has a little bit of fear and a little bit of hatred for House Atreides, not only because House Atreides is distantly related to the Imperial House, but also because in the context of Dune, of the novel that we're reading in October, the current head of House Atreides, Duke Leto Atreides, is very popular with the noble houses. More popular than the Emperor is, with the impression that we get. And that makes the Emperor is pompous and proud and arrogant and has been on the throne for a very long time, but he is insecure. And he doesn't like that. Obviously, he doesn't like a rival for his power. And that is the basic situation when Dune opens. You have interstellar travel. It's all based on the spice. The spice is the only thing that makes it possible because the ships don't have AI. They are forbidden to develop any kind of an electronic brain that would make that navigation possible without the spice. So the spice is absolutely necessary for that. No one's going to break the Butlerian Jihad. And the planet Arrakis, the desert planet Dune, is ruled over by House Harkonnen as a sort of fiefdom for the Emperor. They pitilessly pillage it for resources. They mine the spice and send a spice quota to the Emperor while also hoarding spice on their own. They terrorize the local inhabitants of the planet, the Fremen, a tame version of which live in the cities of Dune, and a wild version of which live in compounds out in the desert where no one else can live. And at the beginning of this book, right before this book begins, the Emperor has ordered the House Harkonnen to leave their fiefdom of Arrakis and House Atreides to take it over. On the surface, this seems weird. On the surface, this is a weird order. The person who controls the fiefdom of Arrakis has their hand on the spigot of enormous wealth. If you are the one providing spice for the rest of the Imperium, it's a plum thing, which is why the Harkonnens have been there for so long. But the Emperor orders the change, and he installs a judge of the change, an imperial officer, to make sure that all the forms are filled out correctly. And House Atreides has no choice. This is all happening right before the beginning of this novel. House Atreides has no choice. If Duke Leto wants to defy this order, he would have to take his whole family and leave the Imperium, go rogue. Take all the family's belongings and go outside of the law, where anyone can hunt them. He refuses to do that. Instead, he walks into what he knows is a trap. He just doesn't know how it's a trap. He knows that it can't be genuine. It can't just be out of the kindness of the Emperor's heart, because Duke Leto knows as well as the Emperor does that there's a little bit of ill will between them, and a huge amount of ill will between House Atreides and House Harkonnen. Duke Leto has to assume that House Harkonnen isn't going willingly and will load the planet with booby traps before they leave. Traitors of all kinds. So it is a trap. It's a very, very dangerous thing. And that is what is happening right as the novel Dune begins. That order has already been given. There is no choice but to obey it. And so House Atreides is packing up from their home planet of Caladan, a lush, green-skied water world. They're packing up and leaving Caladan in order to go to Dune and take it over as its feudal overlords. Despite the fact that they know the Emperor can't have a good intention, and despite the fact that they know they're walking into a Harkonnen stronghold that's probably barbed with traps against them. In other words, it looks extremely dangerous. It is extremely dangerous. And Duke Leto is worried not only about his own political futures, but also about his concubine, the Lady Jessica, who is an adept of the Bene Gesserit, but is not actually his wife, and his son and heir, Paul Atreides, this guy. What kind of a world is Duke Leto taking him into? That is how Dune begins. That is the deep background on the beginning of this novel. That's your DunePrep. A galactic empire, one noble house ordered to go in, to leave their home and go into a hostile alien planet. No more hostile planet exists. Dune is a desert world. No water. Fierce local tribesmen, gigantic carnivorous worms. Duke Leto, one noble house and its leader, are ordered by the Emperor to go and take over that holding. With the previous house owners, the Harkonnens, being ordered to leave. You know that something's up when that order has already been given when this book starts, and you know that something is up, that there are machinations within machinations. And you just have to figure out what they are, and so do the Atreides if they hope to survive. So that is how this book begins. That is the setting right before this novel starts. And I'm hoping that that helps those of you who are coming to this for the first time. Those of you who are not will already know this, but those of you who are coming to this for the first time might be wondering what the heck is going on here. That's what's going on here. A noble house has been ordered to take over the ruling of the desert planet Dune. They're ousting the old house, and they're doing it at the orders of an emperor. And both the emperor and the old house have axes to grind against them, so they know they're walking into a trap. They just don't know the nature of it, and neither do we, and that's how the novel starts. For Paul Atreides, it's the beginning of an entirely new life. He knows he will never go back to Caladan. He knows that whatever future he will have to make on Dune. And everything that happens in this book and all the sequels spins out from there. So I thought I would give you a little Dune prep just to calm your nerves a little if you're one of those people who've been contacting me saying, well, I don't really know what I'm getting into. It seems bewilderingly complex. It is. Frank Herbert thought all this out to a fairly well and then decided to tell the story and make, ordinarily an author of fantasy or science fiction who had this much backstory would rather maladroitly just drop in huge blocks of info dumps, huge exposition dumps. And Frank Herbert chooses not to do that. Instead, there are expedition dumps in the beginning of this book, the first book especially, the first chapter especially, but they're extremely artfully done. Some of the most elegant info dumps in all of imaginative literature. And that means that maybe they come a little too late, and maybe they're not taking into full enough account how bewildered and behind you will feel before you get to them. So I thought I would offer this to you so that you can appreciate the artistry of those info dumps when they happen. This is not meant to be a forbidding book. It's just the way Frank Herbert thought. That's all. It's the way he decided to tell his story. But now you know the basics. Those are the basics of Dune. It's the one place anywhere in the human universe where melange can be found. And melange is the one thing that allows spacefaring to happen. So the person who controls the fiefdom of Arrakis is in a pretty key position, whether they realize it or not. Those are all of the political and social factors that are trembling and in place when this novel starts. So I will see you the first weekend of October when we will read the first book of this novel. It's broken into, the novel's broken into 3 parts, and then there are a lot of appendices at the end. So we are making the appendices into the 4th part. So we'll be reading the first whole book of Dune for the first weekend in October. And I hope to see you there. So anyway, that's my attempt at bringing you up to speed. I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.